Hey y'all. Um, it has been a long while. I didn't intend for it to be this long, but like life kind of happened and then I just kind of had to focus. So, last time I had made a video that was like 7 months ago, which is actually kind of hard to believe, but that was 7 months ago, back in November. And At that time, I had finished with my peds rotation, and then at that point, I was had just started my OB and women's health rotation. So fast forward, it is now June, and I have a lot has changed. We know that coronavirus hit back in March. So y'all know that was my last semester. My semester ended in April. So I would have graduated on April the 26th. So I had my last clinical rotation with the first nurse practitioner that I worked with during my first rotation. So she was also the woman that I worked with during the last rotation. And so probably like I would say like a little bit, I would say maybe about a little under a month before I would have really been done, clinicals got canceled. And so luckily, I was very blessed in the aspect because I know a lot of students had some issues with their clinical rotations at like, at other schools and stuff like that, and having a hard time trying to figure out how to get those hours. But because I was in my last semester and because I was in my last semester and I had enough hours to be counted to be able to test and everything. I just was able to be done with clinicals early since they got canceled and I didn't have to worry about making up any extra hours. So um, after that, after clinicals got canceled, everything just continued as normal online. And then I finished all my finals and, did all that. My school ended up offering like some supplemental things. So they did offer like Suboxone training and like addiction training type things that we did for a grade since we could no longer go to clinicals, which was kind of nice because that's something that I can add on my resume and, things like that if I ever decide to work in that area. So that happened. So yeah, finals all got done. Of course, graduation got canceled. I had already bought 3 dresses and stuff. I'd already had everything planned out. And so obviously, that kind of sucked a little bit. But nonetheless, I was still glad to be done. So graduation date would have officially been April the 26th. And so once school finished up, what actually happened was the nurse practitioner that I had been working with during this last rotation, and also, as I said, same lady I was working with during my very first rotation, she actually has her own business. So she's had told me that she wanted me to work with her when I finished school and everything. So once I finished school, had a few, weeks off and stuff, and then I started actually helping to see some of her patients, primarily doing like telehealth, and then we started going to a rehab facility one day out the week, and I, was only working 3 days out the week, to kind of also focus on studying for boards because, finished school but still had to study for my boards and everything. So had been doing that. And as far as my studies go, so I ended up taking my test. I decided to take the AANP because I just liked the fact that it was more clinically based. Me and like the theories and all that stuff that may appear on like the ANCC or AANC. I didn't think that was going to be something that I wanted to do. So took the AAMP, just took that literally like last week on Thursday the 25th, and I passed. Yay. So I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that I did to study. I would say I gave myself about, where I was like really, really focused on studying, I gave myself about a month. Maybe a little bit over a month. And I was studying maybe like a few hours a day. The closer that the time got to being, to the 25th, that is when I really, really, really started to focus. So what I did for preparation, I know in my previous videos I mentioned the Leak Nurse Practitioner book. No, I mean, I'm sorry, the Leak FNP, like the prep book that I'm sure most people know about. I studied off of that. Read pretty much that whole entire book, and then I did answer all of the questions. It was like a total of like 726 questions or something like that, practice questions. So I studied that. I also ended up purchasing Latrina Walden's Bronze Crash Course, which she had several videos, and she just discussed like buzzwords, specific topics, and areas that usually show up on exams. So I watched those videos and listened to those recordings. And then I also purchased her live review, which I took on the 14th. That was the latest one, towards like the time that I had my exam. So that was like the latest one, aside from the one that was also on the 25th. But I obviously couldn't do that one because my test was that day. So her live and her Bronze Crash Course had different topics on both. She was great. Like, I would say study Leak first, kind of go through that book, make sure that you know the very like main points and everything, especially those areas in bold that like the clinical pearls and like the extra exam tips and things like that in there. Really focus on that stuff, but just try to get a good understanding of the most important subjects in that book. I did that first because I wanted to have that underway for the most part before I started listening to any other review. So pretty much got through that, listened to the Bronze Crash Course, and then once the date for the live got here, I pretty much went through all of those other things. And so during her live, it was kind of like, okay, let me see what I actually really know. Let me see if I feel comfortable, because she would ask questions, you would type in answers and stuff on the little Zoom thing, because it was like a Zoom meeting. And that was very, very, very helpful. And then in addition to that, the other thing that I did do to supplement my studies was the OLIA, her like videos. I feel like her videos went a lot more in depth than the actual test was. However, in my weak areas like musculoskeletal, because I always felt like I was weak in that area, and then like asthma, some of the peds stuff, I went back and like watched some of her videos because I feel like she goes a little bit more in depth. So that was great. Like that actually really helped me also. So by the time I finished like doing all the review things, that's when I wanted to start doing practice questions. I did not start doing practice questions until like literally like probably a week before my exam, because I was like, well, it's no point in me taking practice questions if I haven't studied everything. So I wanted to wait until I pretty much went over everything and then started doing practice questions. So I started doing Leaks practice questions. I would do about 175 to 150 a day. And then I also did 2 of the PSI exams, which is on the PSI website where you schedule to take your actual exam. So I took 2 of those. Honest opinion on that is the format is set up like the test. Some people said they had like similar questions on the test, or like word for word questions. I honestly didn't notice that, but I did notice a few questions that may have been like reworded and mixed up with different answer choices and stuff. So I don't know. I don't think I needed to take 2 of those. I think it was good just to maybe take one. And I, took the 2021, and then it was one that was 2017. I took, 2. So I think maybe one of those would have been okay. And then I also did end up taking the APEA because I kept seeing people mention, and I was like, okay, I need to do this since everybody is kind of mentioning this as something that they did. So I ended up purchasing the 2 practice tests for, I think it was like $59 or something dollars. So I purchased that. I took one day and took the other the next day, and this was literally like, these ones were like right before I took my test. So took my test Thursday. I think I did a practice test on Tuesday and one on Wednesday for the APA. Both times I had scored over a 70%. I think the first time I scored a 74, and the next time I scored a 77. And so anything over a 70 on those tests is considered passing. Or as a good predictor of passing the exam. I felt like those tests were definitely more difficult than the actual exam. Don't get me wrong, there was some stuff on the exam that some of it was like, okay, you had to think a little bit on them, or they might have been a little trickier. But for the most part, I would say the APA exams go a little bit more in depth than the exam. And on the exam, so the whole process for that, on that day, on the exam day, I woke up, showered and stuff first thing when I got up, because I decided to schedule my test for 2 o'clock because I be up, and it's late right now. Actually, it's like 1 something in the morning now, so I be up late. So I was like, let me schedule my exam to be in the afternoon instead of not no 9 in the morning or nothing like that. So scheduled it for 2 in the afternoon. Woke up that day, got in the shower and everything, got dressed, and made me some food and everything. And then at that point, during this whole time, like of me getting in the shower and me eating and everything, I have a speaker that I listen to all the time. And so what I did was I put the recording of the Bronze Crash Course on a speaker while I pretty much got ready and ate and cooked and everything that day. And then I also kind of went back over a few of the elite questions, like the answers and stuff and the rationales for those. And then I kind of looked at some of those areas that I felt like, okay, let me look at this one more time. And then on my way to the exam, I still continue to listen to Walt and the recordings that I had, and said a prayer and everything. And at that point, I think I was kind of fed up with studying, and so I was like, okay, whatever I don't know at this point, I'm just not gonna know. So said a prayer, got there fairly early because they usually want you to get there like 30 minutes before your test. So I got there probably at like 1 o'clock. So I studied in the car, looked at some last minute things for like 20 minutes, got out, went to the bathroom, because y'all know the test is like, they give you 3 hours, but it's 150 questions and you are timed. So you really don't, your time doesn't stop if you have to get up and go to the bathroom. So did all that jazz and stuff, got there into the room, which at my site, and this may vary based on the state, but we were supposed to have our masks on the whole time. So the whole time of taking the test, I had my mask on the whole time. And took a breather once I got there. I wrote out like the murmur mnemonics, Mr. S and Miss Art, on my scrap paper, because they give you a scrap paper and everything that's already sitting next to your little cubicle area for us. So did that, wrote out a little inspirational scripture, and then what I did during the test, every time I answered a question, I had numbers on my sheet, on my scrap sheet, 1 through 10, and 11 through 20, that type of thing. So once I would answer a question on the exam, if I felt like, okay, that's extremely straightforward, I know this is right, I ain't second guessing it, I would put a check mark on my paper. And then if I got to a question where I was like, not really 100% sure, but felt like the answer that I chose was the best answer to my knowledge, then I would put a question mark on my sheet, just to kind of give myself an ideal at the end of the test, like how many questions was I somewhat unsure on, just to kind of see, just to kind of make me feel better. That's, may work for some people, may not work for others, but I felt like it was like a comfort thing because I went back by the end of the exam and I was like, okay, I kind of questioned these ones. Let me go back and look at these questions on the actual, exam. Some of them I did mark, and those were ones that I was just extremely unsure on, or that I had, saw another question that made me remember something about whatever question it was that I was, unsure about. So, that's pretty much what I did. I didn't really go back through all the questions. I kind of just went back to the ones that I had marked, was just very few that I marked. And then the ones that I had put question marks on my sheet, I kind of just went back and glanced and was like, okay, am I going to keep this the same? Preferably, I don't recommend changing your answer unless you really feel in your gut, or you go back to it and you're like, nope, that's not it. This is probably the more likely to be the right answer. If you don't feel like extremely sure like that, don't just go back and change stuff. Don't go back and change like 5 answers just because you put a question mark and you weren't sure. Don't do that. So yeah, went back, through all the ones that I had question marks on. By the time I had went through all of this, I still had about 20 minutes left. There's more than enough time on this exam to sit there, ponder, think, in my opinion. I feel like I had way more than enough time because I'm not a super duper quick test taker. So I go back, I read questions twice, I read answer choices twice, just to make sure that I don't miss something. Because if I speed through something, I will miss an important word, like what's least likely, or, all of these except. So, but I had more than enough time to go back and review everything. Had about, 20 minutes left by the time I actually submitted my exam. So, the good thing about this exam is that right away. So submitted my exam, and then this one I started to get back nervous, because during the exam I would say I was not really super nervous, but afterwards, like when I knew that I was like about to be done, and I could start feeling like my heart beating, fast again, and I'm like, oh Lord, I'm about to find out if I'm gonna, pass this test. So submitted the exam, got up, and they had already had my results printed as soon as I walked out there, and it was 2 sheets, which kind of threw me off. So heads up for those who are taking that exam, there's typically 2 sheets that you'll get, not just one, because I was thrown off because I was like, oh my gosh, it's 2 sheets. Do that mean that I failed? Because the first sheet that I picked up, I didn't see anything about passed on there, so I got extremely scared. And then on the front sheet, it said, oh, okay, this is a preliminary result, whatever, you pass, whatever. So I was extremely excited about that. Thank the Lord. I'm very glad that, that's done. As far as like my last, talked about my last semester and everything, it really was like nothing major throughout the last semester. I think that the last semester was probably not nearly as stressful as the one that I last made my video. That semester was quite stressful because of my clinical situations. Mainly the one clinical situation. I actually don't think I got to that point in that other video, the last video, but the OB, or the midwife that I was working with, what I ended up having to do, I ended up doing my last 2 days. I left her and ended up doing my last 2 days back down at the ER with the other preceptor, because she was not allowing me to count hours that I didn't see patients, which is the school's rule and stuff, but she was just really by the book. So I had to end up leaving her, moving forward to go back down to the the ER that I was at. And luckily the school allowed that because they knew that I had already struggled to find a preceptor for women's health anyway. So yeah, that semester was really stressful. Like I said, my last semester honestly wasn't extremely stressful. I had been working at I was working as a contingent or contract nurse. And I had been working in a neurology outpatient clinic, and it was okay, you know, it was pretty good. It was very easy. And then once COVID hit, I ended up starting to work from home. I did that for about 2 weeks before I got laid off. So I got laid off, and then at that point, I did not have a job. I decided that the best thing for me to do was to mainly focus on school, because at this point, this was like in March. So I was like, let me just focus on school and stuff, because I had all these exams that I had to do, all these added things that I had to do also because of clinical getting canceled. And then, then just trying to start studying for boards and everything. I tried to do that as much as I could while I was in school, at least like brushing up with LEAK and stuff. Which I find that LEAK may also be helpful for some people to actually study for some of their exams while they're in school, because it did help me, so it might help some other people. But yeah, I just focused after I got laid off. I just kind of focused on school for the most part. Luckily, I was able to finally get unemployment, and also I had been doing DoorDash on the side for extra money. And believe it or not, you can make a decent amount of money doing that. You put enough time into it, because I was working maybe like 5 hours a day during the week though, or maybe like a few days out the week and stuff, and I would make a decent amount of money, enough for me to make ends meet at home. So that was a good option for me. That helped me out in the process of me trying to get my unemployment that I took forever to get, and finally got all the back pay and stuff. So that was really helpful. That was my work situation during the last semester. And so now stuff is just really not back to normal. I kind of, I work as a nurse practitioner now, which, like I said, I'm blessed because of the lady that I had, been blessed to meet and have as a preceptor during school. So I work as a nurse practitioner. I see patients 3 days out the week, or at least as of previously I was seeing patients 3 days out the week. On the phone, I would do visits, or visits via like the video chat. And most of these are established patients, so they just kind of need refills, or they might have some kind of specific concern. And to be honest with you, when you do telehealth, you realize how much diagnosis and things like that can come from your history and everything. Not necessarily always just a physical exam, but the history is like a very, very important aspect of seeing patients also. If you don't have a good history, then it's, kind of difficult to come up with what could be going on with somebody or what they need. So I've learned that, especially doing telehealth, because you can't always assess certain things. But it's been a really good experience. And then on Wednesdays, we go to a rehab facility. And that's also really good because a lot of the patients there have a lot of chronic conditions. So they might have diabetes, or, we've had some people that newly diagnosed diabetes or hypertension, some with asthma, some of the chronic conditions that you quite often see in the office. So it has been very, very useful. It's been a very, very useful experience for me. And it's been a lot, though. It's a lot of documentation, still learning the billing and coding, but I am slowly but surely learning that. And it's just been good. Like, it's been a good experience. So I think that's pretty much it. I think what I'm going to start doing is making videos now, just discussing like where I'm at in my nurse practitioner journey, since now I'm completely done with school and completely done with boards. And then also, I think I also want to incorporate, some some additional things, just some random life things, and then some other nursing related things, and not necessarily just the nurse practitioner aspect. And that is pretty much it. So I'm gonna go to bed because I'm up late per usual, and I need to kind of change that. So have a good night, y'all.